All right, welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Kellen Winchell and I'm an in-market Senior Business Development Officer of Agriculture for Alberta Agriculture, and I am co-located at the Consulate of Canada in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The purpose of today's session is to provide you all information on becoming a craft beer of Canada with Esber Beverage Company. There will also be a review of the three-tier system and an overview of the US market. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat, and myself and Marissa will assist in getting them answered throughout the presentation. Now I want to welcome our speaker. Today we have Dave Esber. He's the president and founder of Craft Beers of Canada. With that, I will turn it over to Dave, and he will go ahead and start his presentation. Oh, Dave, you're on mute. Oh, still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Good morning, everyone. The 125 slides have been reduced to 70, and we'll try to get you out by sunset. It's not clicking on my end. Okay. I'm Dave Esber. If you scramble the name Beer or Esber, it spells beers. So it's natural that the family would get in the business. 1937 is when our beverage business started. And in 2010, we started the import business. Well, history, we have a dedicated staff that does nothing but focus on Canadian beverages. We're in 12 states, mostly around the Great Lakes, plus Florida. Florida because 3.2 million Canadians visit there annually, and $68 billion worth of real estate is owned by Canadians. The three-tier system, most of you have some familiarity. I'll touch on it briefly. After Prohibition, which turned out to be a miserable example, the Congress decided there had to be three tiers. The supplier, which is the brewer or importer, which would be us. The wholesale distributor, which my family is a part of with Esber Beverage, as well as the other 2,000 distributors. They buy the beer from the supplier and then sell it to the retailer, which is the third tier. In some countries like the UK, the breweries often own the pubs. The idea here was to control the sale of alcohol, keep the booze out, and to control excess consumption. The US, big audience, 350 million people, tremendous number of licensees. I understand in Alberta you have just under 10,000. Ohio alone has 10,000. There's 8,400 breweries. There's two breweries opening every day. And with the pandemic, we're seeing some closure, roughly one a week. Some of the leading breweries took the money, Lagunitas, Ballast Point, and Stone, to name three. Some of the others just closed. Many more opportunities to sell beer here, but you have to get a lot more yeses compared to the other areas. The states we're in, as you can see, Florida is the anomaly, but because of the resort area and the number of Canadians, we've expanded to there. And most of the others mirror the Great Lakes and the Atlantic coast. We're looking at the concept of resort and vacation drinking. Yuengling was an anomaly. Many years it was just a regular beer. And some genius decided to start with the East Coast, and they put it where people vacationed. So once that happened, people came back from vacation and wanted the beer. When it hit Ohio, people actually slept in the parking lot to get the first case. General map, One thing we have to deal with is the distance between Alberta and the bulk of the population in the US. California is the biggest state, but there's 800 plus craft breweries there, and we don't see it working very well. We focused on the Northeast segment, starting with Illinois, which is 1,500 miles away, over to Boston, which is 2,000 or 2,500. We're based in Ohio, which is 2,000 miles. So one challenge we will have is transporting the product and keeping it fresh. Craft Beer of Canada, we're unique in that we're not only a beverage distributor, but we're an importer. We work with you to help sell your beer. Nobody can do it alone. You have to have proper labeling. You have to have the products registered in different states. Our role is we help you do those things. We buy the beer at FOB, pick up the beer and deliver it to the distributors. We pay you and collect from distributors. We organize the market plan and pay the various taxes and licenses. And we oversee the quality control, but you just can't put the beer on the dock. You're going to have to commit time and resources to make it work. With 8,400 breweries, if you drank a beer a day and lived to be 100, you couldn't drink all the beers out there. Our company is solely focused on Canadian beverages. For a number of years, we looked at different concepts of import. I met with Hungarian wines, and they're great wines, but it's very impossible to pronounce the names. So the light bulb went out in 2010, and we started with Waterloo Brewery in Ontario. We now work with 6 Ontario breweries and added some wineries. We're the leading importer of craft beers out of Canada. Unique to us is we have actually 3 full-time reps that work the market. As you'll find out, most distributor sales reps have too many things to sell, and they're not worried about selling your beer. They're worried about their golf game, their bowling score, their vacation, and so forth. We're out there every day helping you sell in the market. And there are a number of companies that will promise you, hey, we'll get you in 50 markets. They might, but who's going to control the quality and what happens tomorrow? You have a food product. When I was growing up, my job was quality control on Miller beer. This isn't the Philip Morris Miller, but it was a Fred Miller High Life back in the way back. The bottles were clear, there was no pasteurization. So my job was to take the little cardboard caps and put them on each side of the 6-pack because they were basket carriers. That's the quality we believe in as Esber Beverage, and it carries through. One bad beer will hurt you. I point to the story, if you might have heard of Schlitz Brewing Company. In the 50s and 60s, it was #1. Their tagline was, Schlitz, the beer that made Milwaukee famous. Well, a smart MBA came in and said, look, guys, if we cut our brewing time down from, say, 7 weeks to 5 weeks, we'll save X millions of dollars. Well, the problem is the beer was green when it was released, and it killed the beer. You won't find a Schlitz now. We're the opposite. We want to go very slowly. In 12 years, we're only in 12 states out of the 50. And if it doesn't work, we got to figure something out. In terms of what's it take to succeed in the US, definitely some luck. Your brews have to be unique. You have to have a following around you. Your brew pub is a good test market for what people and consumers will drink. You have to have a passion for the export. You're not going to make a buck the first day. You're going to spend money. You got to see it as a marathon. Your ratings, probably up there as much as, and definitely down here. The consumer will look at their iPhone or their Samsung, and they'll pull up the ratings on Untapped to rate beer. The best beer in the world without good ratings isn't going to work. You've got to have financial and personnel commitment. You need to have someone in charge of export, whether you come to the US or Australia or Spain, because it's a whole nother world. Your shelf life, at least 6 months, because it's going to take a while to get to distributor a while to get out of that store, and then a period into the consumer. There's specific US labeling requirements you have to have. You can use those do those with a sticker, but you have to submit for registration with FDA. That's our Food and Drug Administration. You have to have a NAFTA certificate, which is now a USMCA. Excuse me. Trump changed that one. It was NAFTA. He had to have his own little spit in there. So it's USMCA, but basically it allows you reduction in taxes coming over. Then you have to come into the market and tell the story. And you do have to have a story. Kellen mentioned that you refer to the glacial waters, the organic homegrown hops and barley. And those are things that make you different. You're going to be some of the most expensive beer out there. So I'll be glad to answer questions, but you need to look inward and talk to your team. You really want to do this. Then you have to look at what's the best beers that you think will work. And can you afford to sell them at a price that'll work in the US? You need to look at what's the lowest FOB you can sell your beer for. Because if you don't make any money, there's no sense doing it. Which option, and we have several options. We recommend you have an export representative to handle communication, oversee product orders, visit the market with our staff. Your presence in the market makes a big difference. So we want to consider, do you want to do it? Do you have the patience and the wherewithal to do it? It's a big audience, 350 million consumers. You've got to jump through some hoops with labeling and submission requirements, but we help you do that. If you have anything in your product like fruit, you may have to do a flavor ingredients sheet, which isn't anything, but it needs to be done. And we recommend that you come down here and visit the US and see the vast number of retailers, the products on display, and make sure you really want to do it. What's the next trend? You look back 50 years ago, there was no light beer. I remember when we first brought Miller Lite in, it was in the 70s. We had people call up and say, we can't sell this beer. Others would call in and say, hey, I lost 12 pounds with it. We like that story better. Lagers, light beers, and even IPAs now are likely of success because it's so crowded and the pricing you'll be at are more difficult to succeed with. You will be some of the highest priced beers. The advertising isn't necessary. Our shtick is more people turning on their friends. Hey, try this. That craft beer drinker, I'm sure is the same up there, likes the new one. Very few people drink the same thing every day, and they're very fickle. Can you change my screen, Kellen? Any questions so far? Hello.
Hey, Dave. Doesn't look like there's any questions. Just a reminder to all of you, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and Dave can answer your questions. I just wanted to quickly, looks like
I froze on my end.
I have a quick question for you, Dave. What areas would you say Canadian, like you mentioned you're in 12 states, what would you say where do you see kind of the Canadian beer products tend to do well in those 12 different states that you're in?
Well, the first state we would bring you into is Ohio, because we have a direct distribution system there. And we use that as the test kitchen. You come in, we have 26 people on the street. We've been around since 1937, and we figure out what works, won't work. The question was, how can you be successful in the US? And I think magic fairy dust, a little bit of luck, and a lot of work is the answer. But we can guide you there. There is a trade show in October that you might consider coming to. It'll be in Chicago, and you could meet the retailers. I think, Kellen, you were going to come last year. But we pulled the plug on that. It is in Chicago in October. I see Kellen's planning on attending. Good. So here's the next screen we're waiting for. Trademarks. You need to look and see if anyone else has your name. When we started with Waterloo, the Los Angeles Lakers, believe it or not, challenged Waterloo with their Laker beer. They were having such a bad season with their team that they probably should have been happy we were promoting it. At any rate, we worked out a coexistence. How are you going to get your beer to the US? You're 1,500, 2,000 miles away. Are you doing business in a closer province like Ontario? What's your packaging going to be? Are you pint cans, bottles, variety pack? Down here, everything has to be at least a 4-pack, 6-pack. In Ontario, we have an issue because most of their beer through the LCBO is singles. Can you do draft? Draft's very important. The retailers now, where they used to buy a case of everybody's beer, tended to get stuck with 22 bottles, 18 bottles, and have 100 cases of dead beer. Now they do one and dones on their draft spigots. It's common to have retailers at 10, 20, 30 different taps and to advertise 5, 10 weeks out what their taps will be. We can help you with a keg. We use MicroStar. We pay a fill, and nobody has to have the investment in the keg itself. Do you have a partner that you can work with to help cover the freight cost? Freight is something with your 1,500, 2,000 miles away is an issue, and it's going to add to the cost. The special language, we can work with you on that. It's basically FDA, the government warning, the size, the imported by, and the product of Canada. Pricing parameters. I assume it's the same in Alberta as it is in Ontario. You don't have to pay provincial taxes, but you will get hit with the cost USDA, USA federal duties and taxes, which are $2 to $4 a case. You have the freight to the US, freight to do a distributor, state taxes, which run from 40 cents to $1 a case, the importer margin, the distributor margin, and the retailer margin. Your retail could be 200% of your FOB, in other states more. For example, in Ohio, if you went out at $24.50 FOB Ontario, that's US dollars, you'd roughly be $11.99 a 4-pack in Ohio. Other states go 40 and 40, so you'd be like a $14.99. Back up one. Okay, doing a little commercial here. Craft Beers of Canada, we're unique. We're the only import company that focuses entirely on Canadian beverages. We have Canadian beers, Canadian wines, and we play with spirits a little bit. We have 3 full-time reps working the market, and this is a big plus. Some other breweries out of Ontario, Mill Street and Muskoka, met with me but decided they didn't want to work with us. Well, they went into New York on their own with no reps. Mill Street soon pulled out, was and has been sold. Muskoka simply pulled out of the US. You want someone that knows the business. We have 12 years as a Canadian importer, 85 years in the beverage business. We know where the bodies are buried. We have the best idea how to make it successful. Plus, we have our Ohio direct distribution system, which no other importer has that. And we have our distributor network in place now that we've been working with. In the beginning, Anheuser-Busch distributors were good because they were hungry. Well, now they're terrible because they get so many beers from Anheuser-Busch. We work with a combination of young startups or wine liquor houses. Be glad to address any questions or afterward or at the end of this. We look forward to working with you. I appreciate your time today. You refer, Kelly?
Yep. We have one question there from Caden from Medicine Hat. Does CBC have a warehouse to store beer for retailers to pull from, or do breweries ship orders when they come in?
When you refer to CBC, are you talking about Esber Beverage Company? Craft Beers of Canada?
Craft Beers of Canada, I'm assuming, yeah.
We do, but Caden, we prefer to piggyback the beer with our business model is we don't stuff any distributor with a load of beer. We pick up from different breweries and then combine it so the beer stays fresh. We like to work on a 30 to 60 day inventory at the most. We do have beer at our office in Canton, but the double handling is phenomenally bad for business, cuts into the margin. The suggestion is if you're into Ontario, we pull from your warehouse there. And I think that's something you all need to look at, the feasibility of doing business in Ontario, and then springboarding off of that. Or if we can get enough Alberta breweries together, then we consolidate loads. But the quality of the beer is important to us. We had one load of beer go to Boston, and we got a consumer comment that they were drinking a can of Flying Monkeys that was only 3 days old. So that's phenomenal in the beer business. You're welcome.
While we wait to see if there's any other questions, I have a question. So how would one start to work with you? You'd start, I'm assuming, start having conversations, and how would that go for the relationship between you and a potential Alberta beverage company?
Shoot me an email, phone number. We'll start a conversation, and then we'll get into details, and I'll be upfront. I can be a Debbie Downer, but really it's more constructive comments, because it's my name on the bottle or the case, the project. I want to be successful, and I'll candidly give you comments. How to get your ratings up, which products might work, how do we do it? After we do the preliminaries, then we get beyond that. We get some samples. I'm supposed to come up to Alberta. We look at the NBWA in October. You got to see it as a marathon. You're not going to put your beer on your dock and pray that it sells. It won't work. There's too much competition. So we need you down here. We need to give you a plan. You need to have everything, all the ducks in a row, and you have to be able to make money. You don't make any money from it, it's not going to work, because you're going to one day say, damn, this isn't worth it.
Thanks, Dave. Another question.
Put them all to sleep.
Yeah. Another question, or what you mentioned, trends look like the light beer trend that now, everyone's drinking light beer. What are some of the trends, or what are some of the types that you're for here in the near future that would work for the markets you serve?
It really goes to what the brewmaster makes best and what the local audience is drinking. One reason I point to Ontario is if you're there, as the millions of consumers cross over, they see your beers in the LCBO in the beer store, and the independents. And it makes that transition easier. You know, we chose Ontario to begin with because of the proximity. It's a couple hours away. I can be in Niagara on the lake in 3.5 hours. It's going to take me a day and 2 hours to get to Alberta. I'm not likely to drive there. I think it's an 8-hour flight or 5-hour flight. So your closest states have no people. You know, Montana, Idaho, Washington State has a population. They've got a big group of craft beers already. So we haven't gone there and aren't even looking at it. We really focused where most of the population is. And, you know, not to say we can't bring the beer in, but when you're talking LTL, a pallet or two, you're talking substantial costs that could go into your pocket or ours.
Great, thank you.
In terms of trends,
yeah.
You know, the hottest thing down here, but I think really truly, and White Claw have the ownership is seltzers, and they're way overspaced. They're like wine coolers were a few years ago. If you do have a spirit beverage, you have to have unique packaging with that. Our federal government protects the consumers. You have to have 355. You can't use the pint can. On the beer side, it's pretty wide open. So I think the best way we would introduce a beer is look at draft first. It's minimal outlay in terms of packaging, and we get a sampling. We get in and get the one and dones, and follows up with seasonals. Seasonals are real good because they have a chance of keeping the tap, or at least getting in the rotation. We don't ask you to do dedicated cans. That's, you know, the quantity you'd have to buy for the US and try to keep it fresh isn't feasible.
Well, that's more
Kate,
a question.
You should reach out to me on the show. The convention in Chicago, we've been doing it for 10 years. Matthew is with the federal government, and he's involved to some extent. But really, I have to do all the nitty-gritty logistics, costing, space allocation. So if you want to check in with me after this video or tomorrow or next few days, we can plan it out. Because definitely, we think all of you ought to come down. There may be some funding out of the Alberta province to help out, but it's definitely the best way to figure out, do you want to do this? Will it work?
Yeah, and just to add from the Alberta side, in regards to, so the question was in regards to the show in Chicago, and if the trade commissioner who is involved with alcoholic beverages in the US be reaching out closer to the date of the show. And just to add on the Alberta side, so Kellen and myself are kind of in the beginning stages of doing some planning for our upcoming fiscal year that starts in April. So if you are definitely interested in the trade show in Chicago, please reach out to us and let us know, as we're going to be looking at what kind of resources or what kind of maybe presence we can have or activities that we can kind of do in this space. So the more interest and what you guys are looking at as breweries will help us determine what's the best approach to take that's good for us and you.
The key dates are October 10 and 11, Monday and Tuesday. Those are the tasting days. It actually starts on Saturday the 9th, but it's up to you if you want to go to Chicago. Good town, lots of good restaurants. Weather may be good, may not be, but it's a good place to go if you've not been there. In my mind, it's a lot more convenient than Vegas. Plus, I actually personally hate Vegas. I don't gamble, and I'd rather go to the beach. But Chicago is a good, easy place to get to, and it'll give you a good taste of the U.S.
Great. Okay, please put in the chat if you have any more last questions for Dave. Again, Marissa is going to be sending out the recording, and she'll send out the slides that were shown during the presentation, which will include Dave's contact details, so you guys can reach out directly to him. And then, like Marissa said, is we would love to know if you are interested in attending any specific alcoholic beverage shows in the US, specifically the National Beverage Wholesalers Show in Chicago, because that helps us make plans for what resources we have available, and to show Alberta that we have people and Alberta companies wanting to take part in these initiatives. I'll just say last call for questions. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you very much to Dave and Craft Beers of Canada for taking the time to present on the US market, and specifically what they have to offer for Craft Beers of Canada. And thank you again, and we'll close it here.